Summer's ending very quickly, and I would like to get in a couple more books before the summer ends, including a couple of classics. So this week we'll be reading a couple classics that I've had my eye on for quite a while, that I think are quintessentially summer vibes. Recently went on a very short trip to the eastern region of Quebec, and I got to read on the ride. And I already finished one of the books, so I'll talk about that in just a bit, and then I'll tell you about the next books that I'm going to be picking up. But I wanted to also just mention very quickly the trip itself because it was so beautiful. I don't know if I'm going to be including the footage before this clip or after, but essentially we went to see the whales, which was an incredible experience. It was my first time seeing whales. We saw a bunch of different types of whales. We saw the humpback whale. We saw, what is that one called in English? The fin whale, I think. The fin whales got pretty close to our boat, and so we really saw them, and they were freaking huge and magnificent. I felt like I was in some sort of fantasy book, and I see a marine monster. From much further away, we got to see the beluga whale as well as the blue whale, both of them being endangered species at the moment, which is why we saw them at a great length of distance because of the laws and regulations which are understandably in place to protect them. The blue whale being the biggest animal to have ever existed that we know of, just to be in close proximity to it was kind of crazy. Very, very cool experience. In that same region, we went to visit the fjord, which is the biggest, I think, or the longest fjord in, if not in North America, in Canada for sure. It's about 100 kilometers. So that was magnificent to see as well.
I don't know if I can find my way out. I'm stuck in a prison of doubt. In this torsion, and everything is growing up tight. There's no room to breathe. And nobody is watching at night. Over the horizon. Need a friend to shake me out again. Need a friend.
Okay, let's talk about the books. So the first one that I picked up and I already finished on the ride was Jean Rhys's White Sargasso Sea. This novel is a retelling, reimagining of the story of Bertha from Jane Eyre. Bertha being the crazy woman in the attic, the first wife of Mr. Rochester. So Jean Rhys read Jane Eyre and she felt that the story of Bertha was incomplete. There was something there that was missing. So this is where this comes in. She basically rewrote her story. So we are following Antoinette. At the beginning of the story, her name is Antoinette, and she used to become Bertha by the end of the story. The historical position of the story is, of course, very important to the story itself and to Antoinette's identity because it's being told after the Emancipation Act, basically banning slavery. So she is a Creole woman coming from a family that has owned slaves before. So her identity is interesting to examine here because she's really in between spaces. She doesn't belong anywhere in the sense that she doesn't belong with the Black community of her island. She also does not belong with the white English people. She has grown up and lived her entire life in the Caribbean, so she's not really part of the white English community. She's being bullied by her peers and by her community where she lives. She has an absent father. Her mother is not interested in her. Her mother is more concerned with her brother who is disabled. So there are a lot of pieces of the puzzle. So from the very beginning of the novel, we get the clear picture that this is someone whose identity is very much unclear. She doesn't belong anywhere. She doesn't have close friendships. In fact, her only friend at the beginning of the novel ends up turning against her. And then eventually, the story picks up. Quite dramatic things happen. She ends up meeting the Englishman that she's going to marry, and we follow their very foreshadowed doomed marriage from the very beginning. I'm really happy that I read the book just for the literary knowledge and context that this book provided me, but the actual reading experience was not the greatest. I did not enjoy being in Jean Rhys's narrative voice for some reason. I'm really trying to piece together my thoughts as to why that happened, but it's really, really hard. Something that I think might have contributed to me not being fully engulfed in the story was the character of Mr. Rochester. So he does not actually have a name in this book, which is obviously very telling because this is not his story. This is not his name that we need to know. This is Antoinette's story. And her name is the important name, and the change in her name is the important thing that we have to care about. It's kind of understandable that his character was not as developed as Antoinette's character, but that also made me kind of not be able to fully delve into the story or understand the story and the perspective that the story was telling, if that makes sense. We actually get the perspective of Mr. Rochester. We get his point of view quite a few times in this novel. I never was able to paint the picture of who he is. From the very first moments that we saw him, he was just kind of indifferent. He was not a hateful person. He did not hate Antoinette. He was just kind of indifferent and didn't really care. But I did not get that sense of like complete hate for this woman until later on in the book, where he just becomes hateful and he does things out of spite. So I understood very well Antoinette's psychological reaction to everything that happened, but I didn't understand how he got there, how he transformed from this kind of like just bland, indifferent man to a fully spiteful, hateful person by the end of the book. There was not really anything bridging these two different characterizations of him. So again, I think that was probably done on purpose because it's not his story, and so we're not really focusing on him, but because he was the catalyst of Antoinette's doom, psychological doom, I was not quite able to fully delve into the story, I think. I think that has something to do with why I didn't particularly enjoy it. I want to be clear, it's not a book that I disliked, it's just a book that I did not particularly enjoy reading. This morning I picked up another book that I wanted to get to. This is The Waves by Virginia Woolf. This is considered to be her most experimental novel. And from the first chapter that I got through, I can already tell why. Essentially, the first chapter begins with a couple of children playing together, but we don't really understand that until later on in the chapter. They're just talking and describing the settings and the plays that they're involved in. And a lot of the time, they'll say something and then they'll jump to a completely different topic 2 seconds later, and you're trying to piece together whether this is something that is actually happening. Like, are they talking about something that is real in their life, or is this part of the play and they're just creating and imagining a situation? I will keep you posted on how this evolves. I've made a little bit of progress in The Waves, but really not too much. I'm starting to get a better feel of what the book is about and how I'm going to go about reading this book, because this is not the conventional novel. I'm going to be reading this book very slowly over the next few weeks, so this is not a book I'm going to be finishing in this vlog, because otherwise I am going to be very frustrated if I just try to rush through it. And the reason why this requires, it really pushes you to do a slower read, is because it's extremely abstract and has a very unique narrative style. So in this book, we are following 6 children. They're children when the book begins. I assume they will grow into adults as the book progresses. We are following their experiences with one another, with themselves, with the world, through their own internal monologues. And this took me a while to understand because the way in which the book is written will have paragraphs. Like you could see a paragraph here, another one starting here. And in each paragraph, it's a quotation mark. The person starts speaking, and then we have said Neville, said Rhonda, said Susan. And that led me to believe that these kids were having a conversation with one another, but that's not the case at all. And how I figured out that wasn't the case was because this is not how people talk. And the second clue is that the following paragraph is not actually responding to the prior one. So it's like just random topics and thoughts and perspectives that don't have a conversation. There's no dialogue in between them. So Virginia Woolf is clearly known for her stream of consciousness style. So for example, in Mrs. Dalloway, you'll have the plot unfolding with descriptions of what is going on, descriptions of the setting, then you have a little dialogue, and then all of a sudden you'll have a beautiful section with the stream of consciousness of one of the characters where we delve deep into their thoughts. And it's very kind of scattered, it's very abstract, it's basically just bits and pieces of how their mind works and what they're thinking about, their opinions, their perspectives, their worldview. Here is the epitome of that style. She really develops that style. And basically, the whole entire book is written in stream of consciousness. There's no plot unfolding, there's no dialogue, there's nothing else than stream of consciousness of 6 different characters. And these are shown to us through various seasons of their lives. So the first chapter starts with them playing in the garden when they're kids. The second chapter is when they go to school. So basically, we see their stream of consciousness evolve as they grow up. It's quite a frustrating book to read because stream of consciousness is, at least to me, very difficult to derive meaning from. Plays with the idea of how a reader reads a book. Because when you read a book, you start reading a sentence that describes something. It could be the setting, it could be a character, it could be the plot advancing, it describes something. And then the next sentence will describe something else that is related to the previous sentence, right? So that's how we write. And then in our minds, we can construct a sort of movie or some sort of representation, imagery of what is going on in that book. Here, I wouldn't say it's the opposite of that, but it's really playing with that idea in the sense that we just get snippets and bits of abstract information in one sentence, and then in the second sentence, it'll be something completely different, and the third sentence completely different. And so really we have all of these different images that are seemingly different from one another. And the only thing tying them together is the fact that they are representative of one person's mind, of one person's consciousness, of one person's perspective. You have to put them all there in your mind somehow to imagine them, and then after you have read the whole entire paragraph, try to see if there's some meaning that is deriving from these million of different avenues of information. And that's very energy consuming, very difficult to do, very frustrating to do. So I'm going to keep going through it. I do not want to DNF it, but it's a read that requires a lot out of me. So I will keep you posted on my final thoughts of this book, probably when I'm going to film my kind of what I read this summer wrap up.
Don't know if I can find my way out.
Little reading update. I needed a break from the waves, and I picked up another book. I already finished it, very short to get through. It's a collection of poems. This is Bukowski's Slouching toward Nirvana, and it's a collection of poems that was released and published after his death. Bukowski is always a hit or miss for me. Some of the poems in here I find to be very honest and unserious, unsophisticated. Like, he's not trying too hard, he's not trying to be someone he's not. And I find that to be hard as a writer. And I'm not criticizing any writers. Obviously, writing is really difficult and challenging to do. But it's just this thing of like, if you write, you want it to come across a certain way. And so you're going to sit there, overanalyze what you're writing. You're going to work on writing in a certain aesthetic. I've done that myself whenever I attempted to do any creative piece of writing. So this is not a criticism that I'm making. I'm just saying that's how it is. And I find Bukowski to be that fresh breath of air where he doesn't do that at all. He just writes whatever is in his mind. And so it's very hit or miss, because I'll read some things and I'll be like, what the fuck did you just say? And then I'll read another poem that I will find to be so revealing and so honest. In this collection, he touches on a couple of topics which are really the typical topics he touches upon in all his work: the monotone lifestyle of a worker, of middle class, women, drinking, gambling. And another topic which I found really interesting that I haven't had the opportunity to read as much about in his work was kind of his own perspective and understanding on himself as an artist and as a writer. And there are a couple poems here which were really cool from that perspective. I think, no, this one is a different topic. Oh, An Easy Way to Die. This is one of them. Another one which I really enjoyed was Oh My, talking really about the intellectualism of a lot of writers and academics in particular, sitting in their big thrones and telling everyone what literature should be. And then I think my favorite and most touching one was a Vulgar poem. This in particular I like the most. They're all on the same topic of him positioning himself as an artist that is sitting somewhat apart from other artists. He's not looking for an aesthetic way of presenting himself or his life. He's not looking for a way to portray something that is idealistic or perfect. He just wants to write. He just sits and he writes. That's his method. This one in particular was in response to, I think, an article that was written about him in one of these literary magazines. And this person who wrote the article called him vulgar in his poems. And if you've read Bukowski, you know he is in fact vulgar. But the thing about him is that he doesn't set out to be vulgar. It's not something he does to spite anyone or to purposefully create some sort of aesthetic around his work. And rather, he just is. That's him. This is who the person is. Like, I feel like if you read any work from Bukowski, you know exactly who he is as a person. And that could be a wrong interpretation, but that's just the feeling that I get from his work. And I feel that a lot of people feel that way as well. So he writes, "To me, there's no agony, no struggle as I write, no loneliness and no vulgarity that I know of. I don't suffer serious artistic cramps." And he goes on and on explaining how most of his contemporary writers that are serious artists or serious writers sit there and they agonize and they censor themselves to portray a certain image of who they are as a writer and to make their craft look a certain way, whereas he doesn't give a shit about any of that. He just sits on a random Tuesday afternoon in front of his typewriter and he just writes. Yeah, that's my thoughts on that. Nothing groundbreaking. I just needed a breath of fresh air with some Bukowski after the mental acrobatics I have to do with the waves from Virginia Woolf. I have a small book haul. I bought one book that I wanted to share with you. Yesterday I had to go out because my allergies started up again. I have very severe seasonal allergies, and I usually have always my medication prepared for when the season arises. But this time around, I feel like it started earlier. Usually it's September, October that the pollen is really up in the air and I start to feel it more. But for some reason this year it started earlier, so I had to run to the pharmacy. And then on my way back, I stopped at this new bookstore. I mean, it's not a new bookstore, it's a new bookstore to me that I hadn't been to before. I just wanted to browse and see what's there. And it was interesting. It's this kind of indie bookstore where they mix new books with older books, or used books, but it was very disorganized, unfortunately. So it was really difficult to go through anything. They had books in many different languages, which I think is amazing, and a great variety of works as well. But the only thing is that it was just all over the place, and I feel like you have to stay there like a couple days to just get a good grasp of everything that's there. But I did find one book that I bought. It's a classic that I've been having my eye on for a long time, The Catcher in the Rye, and I'm really happy I got it. And it looks like it's new. I don't know if it's, again, I don't know which ones were new, which ones were used. Very happy I have this, and I really was looking for this specific cover, and I specifically got it in the mass market paperback edition. I feel that there is a new resurgence of people being interested in mass market paperbacks. I think we're all just tired of the same aesthetic covers nowadays. I feel like all covers nowadays, they look exactly the same, and people are getting a bit tired of that vibe. And so I'm contemplating in making a small section on my bookshelves with mass market paperbacks where I buy some of the classics that I want to buy, specifically classics and maybe more vintagey books. I really want to get into vintage mystery slash romance. I don't know exactly how to categorize it. Like, I have a very specific idea of what that looks like with books from people such as Mary Stewart. I think those would be really cool to find also in mass market paperback. So maybe I'll create a little collection on my bookshelves with that. I think this is where I'm going to close off the vlog because the week is ending. Anyways, thank you for joining me, and I'll see you in the next one.